Is everybody getting tired? I kind of wonder at this stage of the day, do we still have attention? By the way, I noticed some people have left the room, and I just want to assure all of them that I'm issuing a blanket pardon for everybody who's stepped out. So no worries for all of you. I'm not going to do really extensive introductions to this crowd. I encourage you to look at bios. But what an exceptional group we have with us today. So to my immediate left is Michael Clinton, who all of you met earlier. So you know that Michael was the former president of Hearst Publishing, and Michael has, if you're not following Michael, by the way, on social media and in various other places, you're missing something. Michael and his business Roar Forward is now really a leading voice on kind of the emergence of age-friendly, age-forward products and services. So terrific having Michael. Susan Gianinno is to Michael's left. Susan, in addition to being a pal, was the longtime chairman. Even though I've always been kind of uncomfortable with that. I always think I should say chair, but she was chairman of Publicis North America, which all of you may know is one of the largest advertising and communications firms in the world. And Susan, by the way, has led many of the world's largest advertising agencies. She's been on the board of Ad Council. Susan and I are both on the board of CoGenerate, formerly Encore.org, that we're pleased to do. And even though we're at Stanford, Susan, I at least have to admit that Susan is a Harvard ALI alum, and Susan now chairs, I think, the alumni group of ALIers. So for those ALIers in the room, and I see a couple of you, just keep your heads down. You're at Stanford, but Susan is our boss. And last but very much not least, we have somebody who's actually doing it. A lot of theory in this room, but we actually now have theory to practice. Tim Parr is a serial entrepreneur, the founder of Caddis. If you don't have Caddis glasses, you should. Probably some of you in the room do. Tim's going to talk about his business, which is very successfully focusing on an older demographic. So I'm going to start really quickly with Michael and just kind of early lightning round. Michael, so you talk all the time to counterparts at large companies, and let's begin this with the challenges and then move quickly to opportunities and to solutions. But so what are marketers missing? We've had a lot of conversation. Can we all take notice about the size of the longevity economy in Europe and Asia called the silver economy? We all know trillions of dollars, the demographic shift and all the rest. So we all get it, certainly in this room. What are marketers missing?
Thank you. First of all, for those of you who've asked me, Dr. Rahman, who didn't join our panel this morning, she's fine. She had a small medical issue, but she's fine. She sent us a note. And so thank you for asking and being concerned. We were all concerned about that. So I just wanted to say that to the group. You know, one of the things that we see as an enormous both opening and opportunity is all of the brilliant work that is being done in the academic world, in the institutional world, in the thought leadership world about the silver economy, the longevity economy, all of that stuff is really well circulated within that world. And it's brilliant work, but it's not getting out to the outside world. And our mission is to get this message to CEOs, CMOs, C-suite leaders, for them to really understand in a real world way how this is an enormous opportunity for them. They're missing the story. They're missing the story because they're not tuned into the subject from what is being, coming out of academic institutions and thought leadership. And so we're trying to take that information and make it more relatable to marketers so that they not only have an appreciation for the numbers, because the numbers are very rational, but the marketing strategies are not following the ration. They're irrational for so many ways. So how do we break this open so that when we're talking to leaders, and we now work with over 50 companies, And we do a lot of work in C-suite to make this opportunity very real for them. And we have a whole host of ways that we do that. But I think the biggest thing has been breaking through. And a part of that, and I want to touch on what Amy said, a part of that is the marketing world. It is a lot of younger professionals who are not including older professionals around the marketing strategy discussions. And that's also happening in the advertising side, which Susan's going to talk about as well. And so as a result, it is this sort of self-fulfilling, syndrome that doesn't quite open it up to what is the real possibility. So that would be my sort of opening comment.
Okay, and speaking of circulating syndrome, Susan is in a sense at the next level, right? Susan, you've spent your life in a service business. So you have meetings with the marketing people, with the kinds of people that Michael's convening and speaking to, and those people are saying to you, we have X amount of dollars for ad spend, and for some reason they're not telling you to spend those ad dollars in ways that would resonate with folks in this room. Why not?
Yeah, it's true. Even though people in the market that we're talking about here are over 50% of consumer spend, it's only really 5 to 10% of marketing spend. So there's a huge gap there, and there are lots of reasons. I feel a little bit like an outlier in this room in the sense that my life business is not on the longevity economy. This isn't my area. I'm in the advertising world. And one thing, I'm picking up on what Michael said, is if you talk to, which we do all the time, clients, heads of big companies about what they're thinking about, what are their biggest problems, what are their biggest challenges, this is not on their radar. So, but there are issues and topics on their radar where this demographic, this market is very relevant. So for me, it's not a challenge of awareness necessarily, it's relevance. So some of their big topics are, where are we going to find the growth? This market is a big opportunity for that. A big question for them has to do with, where are we going to find the talent? Where we have an aging demographic, we have a shrinking talent pool out there. This older consumer could be filling in that huge gap. So there are big opportunities to make this relevant, not just make them aware of ageism. That's gonna go right over their heads. But the topic of the market opportunity is really a big one. I do want to pick up on, it's a really important challenge, the nature of who's in the advertising business. So I'm going to talk about advertising, not just the average age of advertiser, people who are in the advertising business, is 37. If you look at the majority, it's about 51% female. But if you look at the creative departments, those are the content creators, the average age is 28. And actually that's getting younger. So, and it's white and male. So not the overall advertising business, but the content creators, the creators are white and male. So you've got an uphill battle there. Then you've got clients and you ask, well, why do they come to an advertising agency? They tend to come to an advertising agency to grow their business, ideas that will be relevant to consumers and grow their business, but they also come to the advertising agency because they want to increase their hip factor. They want to be cool. They want to be culturally relevant. And they believe to be culturally relevant, you have to hang out with younger people. They also give a priority to what's next and what's new. And that starts in business school, actually. So we also ought to start looking at what's happening and how our market is getting trained in business schools, because a lot of that training is younger is better. And younger is more important, the emerging market, what's new, what's next. And then there's a technology bias. And then there's all things tech are good, and AI is just reinforcing that. And then there's the belief that younger people know tech better than older. So for all of those factors conspire to create challenges in this market. So that's a little bit more about the challenge. We can talk more about the opportunity later because it's the flip side, but there are big challenges for the ad industry to change and not just counter ageism, but to embrace age and aging.
Yeah, and I assume that when one of those 28-year-old young men who are in the creative department first think about the advertising business, they're watching a Pfizer or a Merck commercial or a reverse mortgage commercial, seeing
Don't want to sign up
two
for that
older people
account.
with the hands in bathtubs or in a golf cart.
What's ironic is Age has a brand problem. And these are brand experts. They should take some of their expertise and apply it to the issue of brand. Age is a brand problem, but that's another discussion.
Right. So, but just to prove that not everybody has this bias or has this failure to understand the potential of the market, we have Tim. And Tim, I know you kind of believe that these things start at the bottom. This is not the first business you've built, but for some reason you recognize the potential of this market. You're addressing this market. You're making old cool in many ways. How did you come to this recognition? What makes you different than all the others that we're complaining about?
Before I jump into that, I've just realized that I'm the canary in the coal mine, according to you.
in many good ways, I think. I hope.
In good ways. And if Michael succeeds, there goes my moat.
That may be, right.
This is my moat, for crying out loud. So I stumbled into this. This wasn't something that I targeted. I was raising money for this company that I needed reading glasses. Reading glasses suck. Make better reading glasses. That was the extent of it. And when I was terrible at raising money, no one wanted to. This is probably 6, 7, 8 years ago. But on the bottom of the box, this is my 50th meeting. In the 11th hour, I put this quote because I just got off the phone with someone who was talking about how 50 is the new 40 and 60 is the new 50. I'm like, I don't get it. So I put this quote on the bottom of the box that just says, kind of own it. And it's not about your age or your income, where you're from. You should just be who you are at the time of your lifespan that you're there. And I'm in this meeting and everything's going great. And she flips the box over, reads the quote and says, you can't do this. I go, why? Just because everyone wants to believe that they're 15 years younger than they are. And meeting over, and like, which was nothing new because like I said, it was like the 50th meeting, terrible at raising. And I put the quote on there just because as a flippant thing. At that point in time, we were just a reading glass company that was going to do a better reading glass. By the time I hit the curb, we were in the Age business. So I'm like, oh boy, like if I caused that much, I triggered something in this person that culturally, I come from a different world. I was born and raised with 80s surf, skate, punk rock culture. We thrive when we get that type of reaction out of the institution. So within 5 seconds, I had pattern recognition go off in my head of like, okay, we are in a whole different business now. We're in the Age business. And it was exciting. And then when I I went home, I flipped the deck into a whole different thing. And then we started to get attention for what we were doing. And then to answer your question of what are they missing, marketers? I think it really, again, this boils back to my kind of 80s upbringing in board sport culture. Some people just don't get it. And I think we have to be okay with that. And the last presenter, like what she said, like resonated really deeply with me because it's very similar to consumer products. If they don't get it, they don't get it. Use that to your advantage. Like that is not a negative, that's a positive. These are the things that we all should be looking for. These dusted over categories that no one cares about. And when Susan talks about 5 to 10% marketing dollars being spent, I mean, the research that I saw was right in the wheelhouse. It was 7%. So you look at, it's quiet. So when you're in lifestyle marketing, which is what we are in, you want quiet industries with low cost to entry. So a 7% or marketing dollars are going, that means that I can operate in there at a low cost, which is what we did back in the days when Meta actually worked, which was probably it stopped probably 2 years ago. But so for those initial years, we were shoveling coal. No one wanted a 50+ customer on Meta. I mean, back then it was called Facebook and Instagram. So everyone wanted a 25-year-old living in an urban center selling mattresses. And those costs were really high. The cost for someone looking for a 50-year-old looking for reading glasses on Meta was really low. So it was a great business model right out of the gate. And I guess the ending comment is some people just aren't going to get it. And that's true of marketing.
So I want to hear more about how to
yeah.
get it, but Mike, will you?
Yeah, I want to pick up on that because I think there's a great cautionary tale and a great American brand that doesn't get it and hasn't gotten it and now is seeing the problem with their business. And that brand is Nike. And today I ran into Liz Dolan, who's the former chief marketing officer of Nike, who's sitting over here, who's now a fellow at DCI. So Liz, great to see you. But here's a great cautionary tale. Nike was born to target and rode the wave of the baby boomer generation. It was born for that generation, and that generation is the generation that drove their business. Flash forward, Nike has ignored the way the world has evolved. They continue to be focused on the cool, the cool, the cool. 18 to 34-year-old, 18 to 24-year-old, let's get them, let's get them, let's get them. They completely have ignored the people who brought them to the party. And to Tim's point, Hoka and Skechers has come in and eaten their lunch. And if you haven't read anything about it, Google any story about Nike right now and the crisis they're in terms of their own business. They just didn't pay attention to the market that was there, that birthed them, but instead were fixated on how do they remain cool to a culture of younger consumers who've gone to lots of other places. So they're banging against a wall and they're not stepping back. And they're a company that just right now hasn't really quite gotten it. And maybe they'll regroup. But Liz, if you want to go back to Nike, maybe you can help them after you're done with your DCI experience. There we go. Great.
Sounds like there's a huge opening for Air Jane Fonda.
There you go.
That's Susan.
Actually, just want to make a point about what Caddis is doing, what Tim is doing, and what Hoka is doing, and others, which I think is a good role model to follow. The old way of marketing is to be very specific about a demographic segment, is to, and the media did this too. The media's all the time looking at what's the segment, how do I reach them media wise? So you segment. We live in a much more fluid world where targeting a specific group, Amy mentioned it, where things cascade, things spill over, things where we are increasingly an intergenerational world and culture. And I think identifying a need or an interest, like Tim did, like Hoka did, you get Caddis at these really funky, interesting boutiques that don't just cater to one demographic. They're in these wonderful, wonderful stores that get young people, older people, middle ages that are drawn in there. And why Tim's in there, it's probably for style reasons, not just for a demographic reason. So identifying in Hokas, there are lots of really young people walking around in Hokas. So I think we all need to stop thinking in terms of segments and appreciate, and that's what I think the opportunity for an intergenerational world is all about, whether it's content or whether it's a product, is really understanding, speak to something that transcends a very literal, linear, siloed definition of a segment or an age. I think we need to stop our thinking.
So Susan, how do we change the media construct for that? Because the media buying construct is through segmentation, and oftentimes it stops at age 54.
Yeah.
So how do we do that?
I think that's changing, and to Amy's point, the data is helping us change that. So if you follow the data, it doesn't necessarily lead you to a specific day part or to a specific media usage. So following the data, I mean, take something like if you look at just a demographic, you mentioned Cadillac, automotive really understands, and most people know now, online purchases, if you look at the majority of online purchases, they actually tend to be made, more of them by older people than younger people. But so you start with, how do you optimize an online purchase environment? You're going to get in a whole lot of older consumers if you do that, but you get in lots of others. So the data is going to take you beyond that limited way of thinking about segments.
So I want to ask Tim about this because so on your website, you and I were talking about it before. By the way, I absolutely commend you to look at Tim's Caddis website. So I think the first line in the about or the history is the Caddis is the anti-aging brand. So are you segmenting in the way they're talking about it that has historically been done? Are you kind of an ageless brand? I mean, how do you think about it?
I do segment, but here's what's interesting and counterintuitive. The younger generation is more focused on authenticity than being hit between the eyes with a message. They're getting so much smarter with some older executives saying, "Hey kid, we understand you," that they have turned that off. So case in point, I helped teach at Parsons School of Design in New York City. And in one of the classes, some kid in the back raises his hand because someone had made the mention of, well, you should expand your market. Like, why are you just targeting older people? And I gave the reason of narrow and deep and marketing dollars and efficiencies and all these other things. And then this other kid had it was really counterintuitive. He goes, if you target me, I won't want you. The fact that you stand so tall for this one thing, now I want you. Yeah. And it's not me, but I appreciate your authenticity of who you are and what you do. And that is the attractant.
So I want to put Susan on the spot. So you and I were talking earlier, I think you know what I'm going to ask you about whether all of our protestations in this room about ageism, our efforts to combat it, our calling it out, and all the rest, ultimately doesn't, in a sense, disserve the purpose, or in a sense, reaffirm, elevate, continue the problem in a way that we don't intend.
Yep, I've looked at. The advertising business has done a lot in terms of shaping culture and addressing certain isms. And there's a lot of lessons learned about what works and what doesn't. And calling out a problem and kind of reinforcing the problem inadvertently makes the problem worse. We're all exposed, because it's about exposure, right? We're all exposed to about, I think about 180 billion spent on advertising every year, and you think you're filtering it out and stuff. All of you on average are hit by 5,000 ads a day, right? It's going to get absorbed. If the message out there is ageism, even if it's ageism is bad, inadvertently you're reinforcing ageism. The message has to be something more positive. It can be among older people. It can be style. It can be mastery. It can be accomplishment. It can be many positive things. The more we talk about outside this room, I'm not saying you don't talk about ageism as a problem, but communicating ageism can counter ageism for some people, but it can also reinforce and get people thinking more about ageism. So I think we need to change the message to the positive things about older people, not about the problem of ageism. That doesn't mean, I know that's a heretical thought. I can see Ashton kind of making faces.
Don't get mad, Ashton.
For example,
we still love you.
Take the World Health Organization campaign. I don't know how many of you have seen it. Ashton mentions it. I think it's lovely, and for people who empathize with ageism as a problem, they will look at it, and it really does. It's a very heartfelt kind of demonstration of how ageism feels when someone that makes ageism an avoidance topic, not an approach topic. People want to get away from that. They don't want to move toward it. So we need to make approach messages related to older people, which a lot of the work is doing. And there's a lot of work that we're doing that does that. So I think we have to be I think it's great that all those categories are recognizing the incredible market potential of this age group, like the healthcare, increasingly beauty, all of those. But inadvertently, the more money spent on older people in those kind of categories only, we're just reinforcing that older age is associated with appearance problems, with beauty problems, with health problems. I think we need to get all those other categories out there and do things like the ad I loved is Microsoft Copilot AI, which just features a whole bunch of people talking about, they said I couldn't do this, and then of course they could do it with AI. And it includes, out of maybe 10 actors, it includes 5 who are clearly over 50. That's great. So they're sharing an experience with another group. That's a positive demonstration of an interest in a product category without calling out an age. So I think we need more positive messages. We need more categories getting into and depicting this age group in a positive way out of the stereotypical categories as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to say that I would argue that, excuse me, the advertising world is way behind. They are way behind what is happening in the culture. You heard from Amy what is happening in the entertainment world. You heard from our editors what they're doing in the media space. The media companies are getting on board on all of this. The entertainment companies are getting on board on all of this. The red carpet is getting on board of all of this. You are seeing age inclusivity seamlessly integrated into multi-generational. The advertising world has a blind spot on this. They have a lot of work that they have to be doing, and they're a creative endeavor, and shame on them for not being able to step out and do the kinds of things that we're talking about. So it reminds me way back 50 years ago-ish, when women in the women's movement forced the marketplace to recognize the change and the difference. They forced that, and the advertisers had to respond. It's the same kind of thing. Right now, not enough in the advertising world are responding to this phenomenon and this trend.
Why?
Well, a lot of it is embedded ageism right into the industry itself. A lot of it is just that. It's the fear. It's their own ageism. What I love about I call Tim the disruptor of the disruptors, because what happened when Warby Parker was born, they were the disruptor. You'll remember that. If you look at Warby Parker's imagery, they're all cool kids under 30. When you look at their numbers, their business, their consumer is over 45. It's a disconnect. So what's brilliant about what Tim did is he disrupted the disruptor by finding an opportunity. So I'm always talking about your brilliance when I'm out there in the world.
Thanks.
But I think that, it is entrepreneurs like Tim. It's really, we're not seeing it on the big brand front. You're seeing spotty, but you're not seeing it as a regular
Which is the way it's always been. Right?
Yeah, well, that's true.
When we talk about how marketers are behind the zeitgeist, this is how the world goes around.
Yeah.
So this is why small companies are started, because we're closer to the zeitgeist.
Totally.
Yes, and if we can be an author of the zeitgeist, therefore, when the big companies catch up to us, we change the story. And we can author the next thing and the next thing, and that's how the world goes around.
So Tim, let me ask you. Last thing in the world I want to do is hurt your moat.
I hate it when
because
you
you got-
I love my moat.
You got a good
got a
vote
great
right
moat.
now, but well, you tell me 90% of the global glasses business is owned by one company, Luxottica, right? I
Correct.
mean, it's a massive company that basically dominates this field. If it was in the United States and we had a responsive Justice Department, we'd have an antitrust effort. It's a European-based company, but it owns a huge number of brands. So are they looking at, I mean, do you have any sense? Are they looking at you and going, who's this guy Parr and how did he figure out something that we didn't figure out?
I mean, other people are saying, who's this guy Parr? But I don't know if, let's just say that there's other brands that are doing that. We're still pretty small to show up on on their radar. But we went after their Achilles heel because they're in the prescription business. They're in the licensing of brands business. They're in the God, what else? They own the second largest insurance, eye insurance. They are prolific, and the one thing that they don't like are reading glasses. Yeah. Because we provide an option that is self-diagnostic, where you don't need a doctor's prescription, you don't need to get a custom-made thing that costs $400 or $500. So that was our Trojan horse. And then once we got the market and this customer that we've all been talking about, then we were safe from the big bad boogeyman.
I want to pick up on something
go ahead.
that Susan said, because I think it's really important as a discussion point, and that's data. And I just want to relay a brand story. We did, when I was sitting in my seat at Hearst Magazines, we did a big project with Rolex. And Rolex had noted, they have a big list of brand ambassadors. And most of the ambassadors they had showcased were men, athletes. And they had a whole collection of a dozen plus women who were brand ambassadors for Rolex. And they said, we are seeing that more women are interested in our product, and we want to do a project around these female ambassadors. So we did a global project with Elle magazine, which is a global magazine, and it was digital only, back to the point. And we ran around, our team went around the world, and we videotaped 6 or 7 female brand ambassadors from Rolex that came from, you know, all walks of life and from their group of ambassadors. The #1 video that was watched globally in every market, that was measured by metrics and data on our media platforms, was an 86-year-old woman named Sylvia Earle, who you may know is a very famous marine biologist. And it like shocked Rolex. They were like, wait a minute, because she was like a last-minute entry into the list. And if you all want to be Sylvia Earle, trust me. And I think that data opened their eyes to a whole different strategy that they developed. So I think that was a great point, Susan.
So I'm just providing warning that I want everybody thinking about questions before I get to the next point. So one of the things that everybody in this room talks about, and I'm very sure people are going to mention it at dinner and people will mention it at the end of the day tomorrow, is we've got to stop speaking to each other. We've got to stop talking to ourselves. I've been doing this a long time now. I think I was at the first Century Summit. I've done many summits of my own. We always have the same conversation. How in the world do we get do we get new people into the room? I'd like all three of you to be really prescriptive. I mean, we need at this stage to kind of say to ourselves, okay, things have moved, which is really good, but they're not moving fast enough. And I know Ashton would agree with that. So what should all of us who kind of operate in this field, think tanks, academics, policymakers, and all the rest who are not out there developing and selling products, or frankly, advertising them or marketing them, what should all of us be doing when we leave at the end of the day tomorrow? Who wants to take the lead? Michael, you want to take the lead? Tim?
Well, I can only speak from my experience. And if you are of the age that you want to see the change, then in a couple of weeks, I'm teaching another class down in Baja, Mexico, at Chip Connolly's MEA for midlife entrepreneurialism. And like, to me, that's how we change things. Like, I want to see more 50+ entrepreneurs getting funded, which is difficult because I mean, if you want to talk ageism, when I was raising money for this, I was told straight up that from a founder of a global company that we all have, who is an app that we all have on our phone in our pockets right now, who said, you're going to have a hard time because of your age. And I said, thank you. That's, no one's ever told me that. And that makes a lot of sense. So I would say, not everyone, this opportunity isn't going to be for everybody from my point of view. And I live in the consumer products world, and I live in lifestyle marketing, and I live in the world of authenticity. So if I can't check those boxes, I can't do it. If I can, then I make every effort to get more entrepreneurs out into this market. Because as we all have seen in all the statistics that we know, it's massive. And it's like, why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is.
How old was Al Capone? I don't know.
I think that was before Al Capone.
Yeah,
Susan.
so for me, again, we're talking now about how do you thinking about changing the overall marketing and business environment, not just the way of thinking about age in general. So I think people need to really think about, put yourself in a business leader's perspective, and really think about what are their priorities, what are their issues, and then how does having a different perspective on this topic help address some of their problems and their issues. They have markets today, almost every business leader is really thinking about growth. They're all thinking about growth. Where's the new source of growth? What's a sustainable source of growth? So that's an obvious question that can be answered by this particular topic. They're all thinking about rethinking the workplace. They're all thinking about talent. There's a shrinking talent pool out there. This is a solution to that shrinking talent pool. They're all thinking about cultural relevance. This is a big solution to the problem of cultural relevance for their brands. So importantly, it's put yourself in the perspective of the person you're wanting to reach and think about what their priorities are and how does this topic become relevant to that particular person. So I think beyond your agenda and think about the broader world and how does this become relevant beyond healthcare? How does this become relevant to education? How does this become relevant as it has? I mean, there are a number of you in the room. We went through ALI, the Stanford DCI. Simon, you're involved in these programs. It's beginning to make inroads in higher education, this concept of really thinking about serving an older learner. The workplace is hungry to make learning more part of their culture. This demographic is a huge opportunity for bringing more learning into the workplace. So really thinking about how does this become a solution. I, by the way, am very optimistic about the changes that are afoot, because I think the generational dynamic, the arc of the generational polls are in this direction. The baby boomers are, I don't know how many of you have read Cass Sunstein's How Things Change. Really, really interesting book. He's the nudge guy. But he talks about how for affecting a change, oftentimes the first kind of change makers are he calls them norm entrepreneurs. You know, they're the folks out there, the AARP Disrupt Aging. They're the disruptors. That's Michael Clinton's Imagineers. You know, those are people who are really challenging perception. And I love them. We need them to be out there. That's what the baby boomers are doing for us, but they're not going to affect the sustainable change. I think that's going to come with the Gen Xers, who are today, the 50 to 60-year-olds are the ones that the baby boomers, a lot of them have moved out of the workplace. The Gen Xers are now the CEOs and the presidents and they're saying, who's saying 50's old? I'm 50, I'm not old. 50's not old. And they're going to be in the marketplace and they're going to change the workplace to make it more age friendly. And then you've got the millennials, and they're ushering in the gig economy and the part-time and the work-life balance, which, by the way, is very relevant to an older market. And that's going to help bring in the older market. So, and then by the time you get to the Gen Alphas, they're already living in a multi-generational world where their grandparents are still working and being the disruptors. So they're not going to have this ageism problem at all. I'm being very optimistic about this, but I think the demographics and the pulls are pulling us in the direction where you all want to head, which is to counter ageism.
Michael.
First of all, I think what she said was spot on, because I do think that we will watch this generational pull because of them looking at the people who are older than them. Think about when many of us in the room were 30 and when we looked at a 60, 70-year-old when we were 30 versus today's 60 or 70-year-old. It's just a radically different on the whole, on the whole. But I want to go back to your question, Paul, which is how do we, what do we need to do to get this outside of the inside baseball discussion, because the bubble, because there's so much brilliance, collective brilliance in the bubble, but how do we get it into places that are untouched? And I think all of us have to find the places that are untouched by this conversation. And, a great example in my world is working with a group that Susan knows very well called the Association of National Advertisers. That body, that group needs to hear this story because they're the ones that lead the thought leadership within that particular segment. So think about, higher education. I'm on a board of a university, and at a recent board meeting, you might all be familiar with the cliff and the cliff that is coming. And that's separate from what DCI does and the work that Simon's working on with Nexel. That's literally that the number of people who are eligible to enter college is dramatically going down. So how does the university reposition itself so that it can target adult education, older consumers? They're not wired to think that way. They're wired to say, okay, we've got a generation of people coming in as freshmen. How do we tap into them and how do we get them to come to our school? So they had to completely flip their thinking in terms of how they're going to build their business model moving forward, because this is not going away, this trend of reduced entry levels into college. So they've got to reposition. So getting to places where this conversation really hasn't happened, I think is really important. I'm looking at Celine here because Católica at Lisbon, at Católica University in Lisbon, just launched a program in longevity leadership, which is a phenomenal program. The inaugural program was last year, first time in its history, but it's bringing a whole group of mid-career professionals to teach them and educate them, per your comment, about what this means from a business opportunity standpoint. And I met a really amazing woman there who is a longevity marketing director. Cool title, right? At Fidelidad, which is one of the largest global insurance companies. And she's doing amazing work, Mafalda. And, a great example. So how do you take these mid-career Gen Xers and, aging millennials and show them they're the ones who are in the leadership role? So finding the pockets where you can get this message outside of the bubble, I think is really an important strategy.
I would also just say, I don't think very many of us, I see a couple who were at Mark and maybe a couple others who were at the 2015 White House Conference on Aging, but you'll remember the most inspired comment at that conference, which was when Barack Obama was president, was from a 90-year-old woman who was kind of an extraordinary story. I won't go into the entire story, who said, how can you design for us unless you design with us, which was ended up being the quote that I think everyone remembered from that very important meeting. And that is the bottom line. I mean, we have to be in these places. We got to get out of these rooms. We have to get into those rooms. And we got to be careful about retiring, because if we're too retired, we won't get into those rooms. So we need to do that. I know Martha, are we too short on that? One question. One question. We have a question. And I know the person who's holding his hand up over there. So who happens to be a Stanford B school.
Be concerned. So this is a comment. I'd love for Michael and Susan's just a reaction to this.
Yeah.
So a lot of this panel, ageism has so many different dimensions, but this panel is much more on the market economy. And there can be attitude sometimes of, wow, these guys don't get it, right? There's this huge market. They don't get it. They should be able to figure it out. I'm extreme here for a moment. I'm just wondering if it turns out it's really hard. It turns out like this is a complex world. Things are changing all the time. These companies, these leaders, they may be bright. They may be working hard. But for them to solve what can be niche business opportunities today, which to some degree, eyeglasses in its current form is an example of a niche with a moat behind it. Is it simply a matter of the market working itself out? That it's less about pounding the tables around ageism. It's more, these are difficult problems. How can we find examples where people turn them into businesses and it's in their best interest to make this work? How much of it's really just a timing problem?
I think it's an education problem. And I'm not here to pitch you on anybody on what we do, but we produce something called the Rural Report and Bulletins, which is a steady fire hose of education about this market and its opportunity. And one of our clients who's been following us, it's a big, huge global client. And through some of the work, they identified which they're going to have a brand new product, which is going to be targeted specifically to this cohort. And I think what they have to be educated and informed. And to Susan's point, it's not shoved down their throat about this is an ageist culture and the blah, blah, blah. They have to be able to step back and take a look at, there's a real opportunity here within our suite of potential products and services. And then they have to identify where they want to place their bets, because big companies have lots of R&D and lots of products being introduced all the time. And sometimes they win and sometimes they lose. But if they see this as a business opportunity, which can increase growth, which is their motivation, then we've done our job. So
quick comments.
So I also think it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be hard if you think enlarge and expand as opposed to a different segment. So for example, if you take consumer cellular, right? I don't know how many of you've seen the ad with Ted Danson. That's attracting a lot of older consumers without hitting people over the head and saying, this is for older consumers because they need this or need that. So you could just expand your audience with your message or with your talent and the content without having to segment in an exclusive way. So there are ways to make this easier for marketers.
So the theme of our session has been, let's make aging great again. Somebody challenged me. I had to say it. Thank you. Oh, Tim, you got another?
Yeah, I just wanted to just add to that last question. Is it just hard? Like, hell yes, it's hard. And that's exactly why you should be doing it. Because if it was easy, like you're in the wrong room. Because especially if you're a marketer trying to win, if you're a startup trying to win in any competitive thing, if you're trying to win, make sure it's hard. Because if it's easy, you're doing something really wrong. Yeah, and you don't know what you don't know. That's right. So,
Paul, can I make one funny? I just want to leave it on a positive note in the sense that we have made enormous progress.
We have.
When I went from, I started out in academics and I went from academics to the advertising business for strange reasons. But anyway, the first project I worked on was oil of Olay. And I had to do some research, conduct some research on a print ad that they had. And it was a print ad with a woman that it was, do you see your mother in the mirror? So we've come a long way when you look at Dove's Real Beauty and some of the,
We've come a long way.
there
We've come a long
has
way,
been
baby. I guess
progress.
it's-
There has
yeah.
been progress.
So let's say thank you to Tim and Susan and Michael, and thank you for your patience. We appreciate it.